wait for this thing to pop up and tell me that it's getting ready to live stream the meeting. So, all right, we're live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Voices of Recovery segment. My name is Chad. I'm a peer support here at the Center in Owensboro. I'm joined here by my friend Mark, and Mark is going to share with us a little bit of his recovery journey today. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell us what your relationship to recovery is, Mark?
Sure. Thank you for having me, Chad. My name is Mark. I am a grateful recovering alcoholic. My sobriety date is August 7th, 2018. I came from a long line of drunks, but as the rest of them, I decided to touch that hot stove on my own. I had a relatively normal childhood. I just thought I just had a lot of entitlement issues. I felt that my parents were failing me because I wasn't wearing the latest and greatest new pair of shoes like everyone else. And I had insecurities and, the same typical characteristics. But all through high school, if somebody I knew was rumored to have had a drink at a party or something, I'd cut ties with them. I was that judgmental towards it. And I had no idea. And I thought I was going to make it without a drink in my life. So I joined the Navy when I was 18, and I was in San Diego. And in order to dissuade us from going to Mexico, they lowered the drinking age on base. And that's when I had my first beer. And after tasting it, I realized that it made a lot of sense that the mascot for that particular beer was a horse. But after that, I didn't drink for 6-7 months. That was just fine. I didn't enjoy the taste. I didn't enjoy the headache afterwards, but I enjoyed the no inhibitions for the first time. But when I reported to my submarine duty in 1995, that's when the drinking progression started really happening for the first time. Anytime I wasn't out to sea, I was drinking. And I was 21, went out to sea. I was at a bar to the point where liquor got involved because our beer just wasn't wasn't getting me where I needed to be anymore. So I had many stop starts because we'd go out to sea. And that was detox and rehab all at once, because getting fussed at for being an attitude problem because of excessive drinking. And at the excess work, you come out rehab, but we always fell for the same thing, that if we were out for a month or two, we're going to come back and be able to pick up right where we left off, which was not quite the case. And so that kept on until I was 22 and I got discharged. And when I got home, I realized that people don't drink like me and people don't party like me and my Navy friends did. So I just went upstairs. I was living with my parents at the time. I went into the kitchen, dumped out my alcohol, and didn't touch it again until 15 years later. I was 37 years old, and I went to a conference for work. And for some reason, drinking beer just sounded like a good idea. So right when I got to that resort that we were staying, there was beer for free. And I realized after a 15-year hiatus, I was just putting them down like I used to, like I didn't miss a beat, because I had the reputation that I maintained until I got sober, that if we were getting around, I was, by the time everybody was on their second sip, I was reaching for my second drink. And so this was 2014, and it was the end of 2013. That's when I was at the conference. And then after that, I stopped for the better part of a year. Like, it was not a problem. So at this point, I was starting to convince myself that I had control of this. And during the summer of 2014, I started playing music. I joined a band and started playing music out, and, disguised a lot of band practices for drinking. And it really, when things started to take a turn for the worse, was when I stopped with the beer and I hit my first ABC store on the way home. Now, I had a strictly non-drinking household that I lived in, and I realized I could take a half pint of a bottle and chug it down real quick, feel good for a while, and ditch the evidence, and nobody would be the wiser. And for the longest time, that really seemed practical, because I quit tobacco with drinking. If I got drunk enough and passed out, I would have a smoke, a little practice of that, and it worked. And I was still the joyful, happy-go-lucky drinker, and the mood at home was light, and everybody was getting along, and I was a lot of fun to be around. So it made sense, but I didn't realize how deceptive. That's when I started realizing how deceptive this alcoholism can be. So I remember the exact breaking point whenever it stopped being fun. I don't remember the exact day, but I remember the exact situation. I was sitting in my recliner, just sneaking drinks of tequila, and one of the kids was running down the hall, just being a kid, and it just made me very upset for some reason. I didn't say anything. I just shut myself in the room, slammed the door, and just started yelling into my pillow because I didn't want to cause a big scene. And after that, it became to where I could not put it down. Like a typical weekend day, like a Friday, for instance, during the time after I had lost control and it became a necessity, is I couldn't sleep past 5 o'clock in the morning, and nothing would open until 8 o'clock. So I'd white knuckle it until a Dollar General or something would open, and I'd buy a couple of boxes of that cheap wine, just to, those were 2 sips each, or 1 sip done kind of things, and that would get me up to where I would start doing my normal errands. I mean, I'm at this point, I'm running errands at being drunk. At any point, if I get pulled to do the wrong thing as a DUI, and just the fact that I didn't hurt myself or others during that time, during the drives from gigs from Wilkesboro to Statesville, and not doing that, I don't feel like I got away with anything. I feel just so fortunate that I was just able to how things wound up the way it was. But when the liquor store would open, I would try to get there a few minutes after 9, because usually a quarter till, that's when the parking lot's pretty full. And I didn't want to associate being in that category. But I'd buy my first fifth and dump it into an old Gatorade bottle, get rid of the evidence, and start drinking it on the way to band practice, which was like 2 counties over, which was an hour drive. By the time practice was done, I mean, everybody that I was in the band with, they knew that I was drinking, but I thought I was still getting away with it. I thought I got a phone call, I got to return, run. And I thought my music was not suffering. And so by the end of the practice, I'd have 1 of the fifths down, and then I'd stop in like one of the counties, somewhere in Davie County where I was, and pick up the other one, do the same thing, dump it, and I couldn't make it halfway home without having to stop somewhere just to sneak a sip in to where I could just have enough to where I could drive. I mean, how quickly that happened. And then when I'd get home, I'd hope I'd have a little bit left for the next day. Most likely I didn't, but sometimes I'd get lucky and pass out before, and I'd have a little bit left, or I could wake up in the middle of the night and reach. And then, sometimes I'd be lucky and chug it down and wake up just drunk enough to get through to where I could start the day and get to my next drink. And it was just such a horrible cycle. And I didn't plan on quitting drinking, because I had it all planned out, because I was so close to losing my job over just being lazy and not doing anything. I was close to being kicked out of my home, and I was hoping that, because for my job, I had saved up my 401k. I was wanting to cash out and just start driving, and until I ran out of money or alcohol or life or whichever. And then it's funny, because the movie Leaving Las Vegas, how accurate that is, especially having, the first time I watched it was in like 92 before I started drinking, but having watched it after a few months of being sober and lived it, how authentic and how frightening that was. But it started where I was blacking out every night, and I was told on my second day of AA that if you don't remember your last drink, then you probably haven't had it. I can remember mine very perfectly. I woke up in the morning and I was on antidepressants, and I had them sitting on my counter. I was just transferring them from the bottle to my hand to my mouth was just too much work. So I woke up extra shaky of a morning to where it was noticed by my wife. What's going on? Were you? And I said, nothing. So I did the where I would I had a thing where I didn't know how much money I'd have in the bank. That was a big fear of mine, because if I checked the bank balance and realized there was no money for drinking the next day, then I don't think I was able to mentally handle that. So I went to a grocery store and bought something small and swiped my card and tried to pull a 20. I mean, it was typically I'd try for the 21st. That didn't work. Try for the 10. That didn't work. Just try for the product, which was a small like snack, because I was eating at this point once a week. And I was shaking and sweating so bad, and I realized I didn't have enough gas to make it to the ABC store, which was a really important thing. So I had the 20 and I had the card. Well, finally I risked it and was able to get enough money to get to that liquor store. But even the simple thing of faking the card out of my wallet, putting it into the reader and pumping gas was like a 10-minute process, and down a busy street of people. Well, I thought anyway that everybody's looking. So I made it to buy one pint of liquor and a half pint for $10, because I had this superpower where I could take any amount of money combination and know exactly what I was going to buy with it and not have change left over. And I was shaking and sweating to the point where the cashier behind the counter was even giving me weird looks. So I thought, well, something might be wrong. So I chalked it up to a panic attack, but I still didn't realize that was going to be my last day. This was August 6th. So I get home and go through the routine and go back and to a different liquor store this time and get the same thing. And it's the same conversation with my wife at night as I get more and more drunk, to where it's, yeah, we talked about this the other day. Wait, you don't remember? Oh, are you sure you're not on something? What's going on here? And through a power greater than me, I woke up August 7th, and just first thing I did was I called at work and said I was going to get help over an issue. And as my wife woke up and she realized I was home, she wasn't happy about that, but she was the one that actually suggested AA. And which was really funny, because I'd wanted to go to AA. I just didn't know how I was going to hide this from her and figure out how to account for 2 hours of my life every single day. So, but finally the pain outweighed the fear of change, outweighed the fear of her finding out, because when I got to confessing, I mean, I did my first step 5 involuntarily with my wife that morning, and she asked me everything. The more honest I was, the more something lifted, like it was out there. Now there was the detox that I still had to go through, but I even remember getting in my car, going to my first AA meeting, and just feeling this wave of peace temporarily to where I got into the rooms. And I was very disappointed with my first meeting, because it was a big book study and there was no sharing, because I had my speech made out, because I was going to let people know that my situation was different and they don't understand the worries I've seen. So the very next day, which is on a Wednesday, I'm sitting and waiting in my turn, and all of a sudden this guy comes in. He's wearing this dispensary t-shirt, And just sitting there, looks like the happiest dude in the world. I'm like, what in the world is this guy's problem? And all of a sudden I laid out my whole thing, this woe is me and that and the other. And I thought it, in my messed up mind, I thought, this is where I get the group hug and all. No, you could have heard a pin drop with a couple of mumble things. So all of a sudden, some guy, without being asked, just laid into me in a very polite way. I'd be really filled with hope one second, filled with anger the next, saying, yeah, if you want to keep sitting around feeling sorry for yourself, you just go back out and keep at it and come back, but make a list of everything that you have. I promise you won't have as much. He started sharing part of his story and how good things could be, and just with his enthusiasm and charisma, I kind of believed it, but I was still mad that he had to call me out and put my ego in check in front of a group of these people. So I wound up finding him in a parking lot and asked him to be my sponsor. And we've had a great friendship, a relationship ever since. I read the big book and started on the steps. And one thing is, I'm still intimidated when I walk into the rooms of AA and I see the big poster with the 12 steps on it. I just remember seeing how that monumental of a task, I'm like, there's no way, maybe try to find the 8-step or a 5-step program or something. But the more I got into it, especially the more I realized how honest I need to be. Like, I remember doing my step 4, and there was stuff I didn't plan on writing, as well as for step 5, and there was also things that I wrote right when my sponsor was coming up to read it. I'd scribble at the last second. And the same as with the step 5. But before I get to the step 5, on the step 4, I realized I just got to this point where this is what I'm going to go with, because I was getting to the point where I was really trying to dig to make sure there was no resentment left uncovered. And I realized that's not completely the point, because resentments still come up, except by the time we get that initial hard ones out when we're at step 10, it just gets easier to deal with. But there was things I planned on holding back on my step 5, but the more free I felt when I was getting the stuff out, I didn't leave anything unturned. And if I did, I'd call my sponsor and, oh yeah, I forgot to say this. But maybe I was doing it wrong, but when I got to step 8, that's when I remember it was a Monday morning. I woke up and the desire was completely gone for the first time in my life. Not only that, but I had this peace, fulfilling that I never really thought I could achieve. And the thing, the real kicker was it was all within me the whole time. And very frustratingly simple solution. And ever since then, I've just been chasing the spiritual experience and just seeing how great life can get. I mean, there's days where I do not like the inconvenience of having to go to sleep at night just because the days are so good. Most times my reality is better than any dream I could ever have. And it just, the more I get into it, the more time happens. I mean, even going through the difficult times, it's still just amazing. It's something I can't even explain. I mean, all I did was just what everybody else that got sober did was, was the rigorous honesty part made the deal. I mean, as the big book, many do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. My last craving was actually last September, and I remember it quite well. I didn't realize it was going to go down this way, but it just hit all of a sudden. So I was going to Taylorsville. Now, I also had another superpower where I could tell you where any liquor store was within like a 10-state radius, or maybe 5. But there was one in Taylorsville. I drove by on the way to Hickory. I just, on the corner of my eye, I didn't really think anything of it. And I was sitting at home and thought nobody would know. And to the point where I started praying, and it was still going on. I was praying with one, and I was getting ready and all this. And I just sat, and it just went away. And I got flooded with this just amazing feeling of having conquered that. And I haven't had a craving like that ever since. And it's all will happen from time to time, but just the fact that what all I've gotten from sober life, and I still feel like I haven't even scratched the surface. All the difficult times that would trip me up and would throw me to the drink. I mean, I had a mental list of, yeah, if this happens, this happens, this happens, then we're gonna put a stop to this sobriety thing. And it's, all of them have happened, but they have made me like want to drink even less than I do now. I mean, I look at alcohol these days as kind of like an abusive ex, but all I did was do the steps thoroughly. I prayed and do the next right thing. I try to keep at peace with people. And another thing is the way that I can see somebody on the street homeless and drunk, I look at that as that's just another version of me. That's what I could have been. I see a lot of where I was. And it's just, once I got in tune with that higher power, it's just so many moments happen daily, so many conversations. I mean, just like the time that I was having a really bad craving in particular, and you were in early sobriety, you just sent me a random kind text message and I can't be going straight down the road. Just things like that. I mean, all I have to do is be still and stuff works out. I pray and do what I feel like I'm led, but there's no euphoric recall to any of this anymore. I don't have that. It doesn't look relaxing. It just looks like, oh, I'm seeing what it does to me. And it's so hard to explain, but how great sober life is and how we have a group of people. We're not original people by no means. All these things that I thought that I did, that I came up with, I was hearing shares of them saying, how they would do the same thing and this and that, but just being able to relate to each other specifically, that not only that, but within the past couple of weeks, I went on vacation and had the opportunity to share my story with someone that was going through and I knew the exact spot where that person was, where I was, and I was able to share that. We can't get everybody sober, but we can plant seeds. And it's just an amazing program and it's an amazing way of life. And I got 22 minutes. I think that's about all I have. And thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, man, I'm glad to have you here. Before we close it up, I'm gonna ask you if you had any advice for one new person, first day in recovery or even seeking recovery, what would that be?
Don't be afraid to accept the hard truths. Don't be afraid to get your feelings hurt, because like I was talking in my story, the person that eventually sponsored me, he tore me down. I took that very personal, but he was absolutely right, because the more I'd see people come and go, and you see how deadly this thing is. I mean, it's best to, and as far as a sponsor, don't have a sponsor that's going to co-sign on your nonsense. Don't make sure you don't have a sponsor that is going to let you slide with dumb ways of thinking. I mean, even mine still, if I come up with an idea I think is good, but it turns out to be dumb, he'll explain why it's dumb, then laugh at me, make fun of me about it later. But and just keep coming back and sticking with it, because going back to drinking is never going to be good. It's never going to solve anything. There's never going to be such thing as controlled drinking. In our case, because there are people obviously that can do the 1 or 2 beers, but those are people that, us alcoholics just don't understand. I mean, I still, even after nearly 3 years of continuous recovery, I still don't understand why someone can go to sit at a bar and take a few sips of a beer and just leave it there and not finish it. to me, that's blasphemy and wasteful. But, and just be honest. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities in the steps where you can cut corners, but the only person that will be harmed from that is the person in recovery. And I always pick up that phone, because even when people call me, it does so much for my sober life, just that opportunity to be able to do something like this, or to be able to talk to an alcoholic. So that's
Sweet. Thank you, Mark. Thank
Thanks,
you,
Chad.
everybody, for tuning in for our Voices of Recovery segment. We will see you next month.